Heyo and welcome back to a new Dead by Daylight video. Yay! In this video, I want to talk about the developer's second attempt of reducing tunneling, slugging and camping. A few months ago, we had a PTB where the developers introduced different base kit features and changes for both sides to reduce tunneling, camping and slugging in matches. However, the feedback for these changes were overwhelmingly negative, and now let's see what the developers have learned from our feedback and their first attempt. For the slugging issue, the developers keep the idea that survivors can build up a base kit unbreakable-like feature if they are slugged for long enough. However, instead of 90 seconds, they now need to be in dying state for a total time of 120 seconds, but their resolve bar fills 33% faster for each additional survivor currently in dying state, which means they can unlock the base kit unbreakable-like feature sooner if the killer goes for a bigger slug. Survivors can also crawl a little bit faster over time, but no longer recover while crawling like they could do in the first attempt. Then, for the anti-camping feature, they increase the range of the anti-face camp zone from 16 to 20 meters, and the longer the killer stays nearby the hook, the faster the anti-face camp meter bar fills up. At the same time, they decrease the base fill rate of the anti-face camp meter by roughly 50% to compensate for the other buff. And lastly, the new anti-tunnel features. For the survivors, if a survivor gets unhooked, the unhooked survivor gains 30 seconds of endurance, 10% haste, and the new elusive status effect that basically removes grunts of pain, scratch marks, pools of bloods, and hides your aura for the next 30 seconds. In addition, for the first 10 seconds, they also see the aura of the killer if the killer is within 32 meters of the survivor's position. When the unhooked survivor gets fully healed, these benefits linger for 3 seconds. They are immediately lost when the unhooked survivor performs a conspicuous action like touching a generator or cleansing a totem. And once every generator is repaired, they only gain 10 seconds of 10% haste and endurance after getting unhooked. So basically what they gain right now. For the killers, whenever they hook a different survivor, so no tunneling, they gain a blood loss 1 movement speed bonus for 15 seconds, but this benefit ends instantly when using their power would also remove normal blood loss. And also they lose this base kit blood loss feature when they enter a chase. In addition, killers now get a 10% blood point multiplier for starting a chase, hooking a survivor the first and second time, as well as sacrificing a survivor. Next, the developers changed some perks due to the added base kit features. Babysitter lets you see the killer's aura for 30 seconds, Borrowed Time got a rework, and whenever you unhook a survivor for the next 100 seconds, this survivor can fully recover from the dying state. Breakdown got a little nerf, and the hook now comes back after 90 seconds instead of 180 seconds, but you are healed 100% faster for the next 90 seconds. Think of it like your reverse will make it. Off the record no longer has the endurance status effect, but every other off the record effect now lasts for 80 seconds instead of 40 seconds. Wicked gives you 50% healing progress when you get unhooked, and anytime you are unhooked, there's no loud noise notification for the killer. And last but not least, Furtive Chase got a rework, or whether it is back to its original version. And now whenever you hook the Obsession, you gain 1 token up to 5 tokens, and each token reduces your terror radius by 10%. And that's the developer's idea how to reduce tunneling, camping and slugging, and I'm going to be honest with you, these changes are awful and bad. Nearly 2 weeks ago, we've had a dev stream where they announced these changes, and I tried to stay positive and be like, okay, we don't know everything, they gave us a little preview, maybe there's more in the patch notes, but no. After reading these patch notes, they made me so angry. Like, I know this is a PTV, but it makes me so angry that this is their second attempt with a lot of feedback in mind, and they present us this shit that is basically a huge, insane, big survivor buff and a huge, big nerf to every killer that is not in the top 5 or not Norse or Blight. That's it. The main issue here is that all these changes make unhooked survivors even stronger than they are right now. Unlike in their first attempt, survivors keep their collision, which means if they body block the killer, they can do it for 30 seconds. The killer can no longer wait it out. Alongside the 10% haste bonus and the 10 seconds aura reading, it is also enough time to run through the killer and protect their teammate by abusing the base kit anti-tunnel feature. And if they do this, you can 100% assume that they also have a DS in their pocket if you are dare enough to actively tunnel them. Now, the developers explained that even without any collision, survivors were able to abuse the base kit features by running in front of the killer or inside of them, so the killer will hit them. And this is true, but it's so stupid that their solution is, okay, instead of reducing situations like these, we keep them easy and strong, like throw it in the trash, like give it up. If survivors want to abuse anti-tunnel perks, here we buff everything, make it easy and simple for them. However, let's be a little bit nice and assume survivors won't abuse their base kit features. That should be fine, right? Right? No. Big no. With this PTB, survivors got even more perks that lets them waste less time with healing. We already have insane strong healing perks in Will Make It, Resurgence, and Do No Harm that basically punish the killer for hooking. And now, with this update, we get Breakdown and Wicked that also heals an unhooked survivor in like 4 seconds. So they can constantly sit on a generator without any downtime. The funny part is also in this PTB version, Wicked and Resurgence stacks, which means a survivor comes fully health from the hook. I'm a little bit fair and I assume this is an oversight from the developers, but it's still so sad that this happens. Then another general big nerf to many killers is the free aura reading after the unhook, because it is an unavoidable one, which means survivors see Sadako, Dredge, Ghostface, Myers, Pig or Skull Merchant even when they are in stealth. And of course it is also a big nerf to undetectable add-ons and perks. This is also a huge buff to survive with friends on top of it, since now they can call out or warn their teammates easier, especially when they get a smaller or double story map like Midwich, The Game or RPD. And all what killers get for not tunneling and hooking survivors and playing Mr. Nice Guy is a Bloodlust 1 movement speed for 15 seconds that goes away once they use their power. Thus, just using the power is not correct. Sometimes killers can use their power and keep the bonus, but other ones lose them when using their power. It is a little bit inconsistent and weird, but even if it was more consistent, this is still nothing compared to the base kit Pop Goes the Weasel and Barbecue and Chili effect we had in their first attempt. I mean, at first glance, you might think this is a nice buff since it benefits weaker killers more than stronger ones, but you are so wrong if you think this. Bloodlust 1 makes a 4.6 killer 4.8, and this is nothing compared to Nurse, Blights, Draculas, Billies and Ghouls mobility. They have base kit. On top of this, some killers like Ghostface lose the Bloodlust instantly when they use their power, which is just unfair because how can you compare insane mobility to just go stealthy? Like, this is not fair. This Bloodlust bonus is nothing. Of course, in the PTB, you activate Beast of Prey when you gain the Bloodlust bonus, but here again, I assume this is an oversight since the developers always look at one thing and never at the whole picture, so you cannot say, oh, but now you have a really funny combination of like base kit, Bloodlust, and then combined with Beast of Prey, and you have 45 seconds if I remember correctly, undetectable, which can be strong. I mean, it is not strong, especially not against Survive with Friends. It is funny, but I assume this is an oversight and this will be fixed if this version goes live. And now what drives me insane is that another solution from the developers is just to increase the score points. This is so fucking stupid. They really think it is enough to increase blood points to encourage players to spread the first hooks more often. Keep in mind, whoever thought and added this to the PTB gets paid for this. This person gets money for such a sloppy and stupid statement, like, I'm so sorry, but the players who play Nurse or Blight and aggressively tunnel survivors out of the game are the ones with enough hours in the game to no longer care about blood points. I really don't know what to say about this. Like, if it was just a random adjustment of like, okay, we want to make the game less grindy, especially for new players, then it would be fine. Then I would be like, good idea, behavior, keep it up. But this is written down in the patch notes that this is an idea from them how to reduce tunneling. It's also so funny that the developers want to reduce tunneling, but at the same time, they nerf furtive chase into the ground. That is a perk that encourages killers to not tunnel. Like, you can make this shit up. It is insane. However, speaking of patch notes, they also said that base kit Pop Goes the Weasel and seeing the auras of survivors gave the killer a limited of how to play the game, because it was hook a survivor, kick a generator, chase and down a different survivors, repeat. And yes, this was a very straightforward gameplay, but at least the killers got some kind of reward for hooking survivors and not tunneling survivors. Like what we now get, Bloodlust 1 and a little bit of extra blood points is nothing. Like, I'm so sorry, compared to what survivors get and how easy they can abuse this shit, it is insane to me. Like, I cannot believe this. Another change that makes playing Survivor even easier is the change to the anti-face cam feature, because by increasing the range, you put the killer in a situation where they either give it accidentally or gets punished no matter what they do. For example, playing on a double story map like Midwich, RPD or Gideon will always fill up the anti-face cam meter more than on weather flat maps like, for example, Ormond, because it is difficult to stay away from the hooked survivor. A different example is when a survivor goes down in a 3-gen area or next to generators with a good amount of progress. You generally get punished when you decide to play smart and hook the survivor in this area and defend this area for a bit. And here lies another issue for weaker killers. Huntress, Ghostface, Trapper or Bubba lacks the mobility and will often fall back to a situation like this, but with these changes, they will get punished for it. Meanwhile, Nurse, Blight or Ghoul, all of these killers have the mobility to leave the area for a little bit and then come back when it's time for them. So this anti-face cam change will basically change still nothing, but makes the gap between killers with high mobility and killers with no mobility bigger. This is not healthy. What also annoys me a little bit is that the developers keep using pure stats to lend more credence to their changes or statements. In their most recent developer stream, they said that currently 30% of the matches have a killer tunneling someone. And at first, this is true because a statistic from the game never lies. However, it doesn't show how or why this happened. As I mentioned before, survivors like to abuse their anti-tunnel features and perks, and situations like these result in tunneling. There are also situations where the killer needs to tunnel, like when one generator is left or when the killer wants to go for the rescuer, but this one is hiding in a random locker, leaving the unhooked survivor in front of the killer like a lost child. Of course, there are also killers who brutally tunnel at 5 generators like their life depends on it. But there's also the issue that killers often have no reason to go out of their way and hook different survivors. There's no base kit reward for playing like this, like playing Mr. Nice Guy, and in fact, you can even get punished by it by perks such as Deliverance or just by the fact that survivors will stay forever on generators. They don't feel bad. At some point, you want to kill someone, so the survivors get a slowdown. A similar issue is there with the statistics for camping. The developer said that camping is still there, but more low MMR than in other MMR brackets. And it makes sense because new players have nothing besides the basic perks, and these are awful. They have no barbecue and chili, no friends till the end, or alien instinct, and of course no good game sense to know where to go after the hook, and therefore they like to camp more because they know, okay, I have a survivor here and a different survivor will also be there at some point. So instead of fixing the real issues in a healthy way of, okay, why does tunneling, camping and slugging happen and how can we make it better to reduce it, they will make it worse with these changes. Overall, if these changes come to the live servers, it will turn every killer player into a Nurse or Blight main, because every other killer will either suffer from all of these survivor buffs or cannot keep up with them. Dredge is a perfect example of it. An average killer that will suffer a lot when survivors abuse the base kit endurance feature to body block for a teammate, or when a survivor just needs 1 second to heal after the unhook and then instantly sit on a generator. On top of it, he's also a killer that never benefits from the Bloodlust reward, even though his mobility is not half as good as the one from Blight, Nurse, Ghoul or Dracula. And yeah, he also suffers from the R reading during Nightfall or the base kit anti-slugging feature, since you often want to slug during Nightfall. And also, of course, we haven't even talked about the syringe rework. Giving survivors a second free spin burst or life also makes the life of every killer that is not Nurse or Blight miserable. In my opinion, syringes are still awful, but now in a different way. Now, I want to tell you how I will change things to reduce tunneling, slugging and camping, because I don't want to make a video where I just complain without giving any input of how to make it better. My first change is to nerf Blight and Nurse, because I'm so fucking tired that these two killers are an extreme that prevents the developers from buffing killer perks or introducing base kit features for killers. For example, the developers often need to nerf our reading perks because Nurse is just too good at abusing them. And this is just one example, but the general result is that the other 39 killers get shitty or no stuff just because two killers are way too strong for the game. Nerf these two killers while keep buffing the weaker killers to bring everything more in line. So we don't have extremes like Blight that wins matches for free and Skull Merchant that often fights for 2 hook stages. Like, it is not fair. In the same way, I would also change some killers by giving them an individual reward for hooking survivors. The biggest one is Hillbilly. Currently he gets overdrive for just spamming his power, which is a little bit stupid, if I'm being honest with you, especially when this increases his slugging potential. Therefore, his overdrive should be reworked by giving him overdrive for 30 seconds after hooking a survivor, no longer for spamming his power. Of course, with this change, he gets the old overdrive benefits back. Deathslinger should get an automatic reload when hooking a survivor. Wesker could get a one-time use third bounce for hooking a survivor, or Play could get her wet puke for 20 seconds after hooking a survivor. These are just a few examples of individual rewards for hooking survivors. Of course, not every killer can get one, but those who can should receive one to reduce or discourage their tunnel, camping or slugging capability. My next idea is to buff solo queue by giving them good quality of life changes. They can now see the progress of the anti-face camp meter in the HUD, which is a nice change, but comes way too fucking late. One big buff I want to give them is an advanced base kit Kindred feature without killer hour that shows you the teammate hour whenever a survivor is hooked, but also whenever a survivor is in dying state for more than 10 seconds. Keep in mind, whenever a survivor is in dying state, when the killer picks up the survivor, this doesn't count. With this change, solo queue players have a fairer time to know what is going on when a teammate is on hook or the killer goes for a bigger slug. It is just unfair that Survive with Friends have a similar feature base kit, while solo queue players need to equip a perk for it. With this change, we close the gap between solo queue and Survive with Friends, but also make the situations more manageable when the killer goes for a camping, slugging or tunneling strategy. At the same time, I also want to split our reading into 2 sections. One is teammate info, like the base kit Kindred feature, the perk bound, or seeing the gen aura due to troubleshooter or quick gambit. The other one is general hour reading, which means perks such as Deja Vu, Windows of Opportunity, or Killer's Hours due to, for example, Troubleshooter or Wire Trap. The next step is then to rework the blindness status effect that it can only affect general hour reading or killer hour reading, but no longer teammate info. This change would also close the gap between Survive with Friends and solo queue, but also making slugging, camping and tunneling situations more difficult for killers, since now they can no longer rely on blindness add-ons or perks. In addition, survivors should see their teammate perks to know when a teammate needs help or when or who should go for the rescue. I was also thinking about a communication wheel for survivors, but I think the advanced Kindred feature should be more than enough to know what is going on when you need to know what is going on, while any reactions to these situations should still be based on survivors' own skill. My next change goes to the camping and slugging issue. I personally would keep the anti-face camp feature as it is right now, but every killer should get a base kit anti-face camp feature that prevents or punishes them for using their power nearby a hooked survivor. Artists and Dredge already have a feature like this, and I think every killer should get one just to make the camping situation more fair for survivors. The idea is that within 7 meters of a hooked survivor, no killer can use their power, and if they try to use it outside of the range and then tries to enter the, let's call it anti-face camp wall, their power hits an invisible wall, so no Baba can charge their power on the outside and then chainsaw into the inside of the wall. Or Huntress can stay outside of the anti-face camp range with a charged hatchet waiting to hit the rescuer. So this change would make camping overall more difficult for killers because they cannot down survivors so quickly, and it would also put every killer more in line since we no longer have an insane camper like Huntress or Baba that can prevent any unhook. Every killer becomes or gets more in line with each other when it comes to hook traits or protecting the hook. However, I would also give the killers a base kit monster shrine feature. Survivors can stay for 70 seconds on hook, which gives the other survivors enough time to stay on generators, and this takes a lot of speed out of the game. If we encourage the killer to spread hooks, we also should encourage survivors to unhook sooner. Therefore, my idea is, if the killer is within 60 meters to a hooked survivor, the hook time is set to 70 seconds. If the killer is between 16 and 28 meters, the hook timer is set to 60 seconds, and everything further is 50 seconds, because there's no reason for a survivor to sit 70 seconds on a hook if the killer is not nearby. This change should also encourage killers to leave the hook area and go for different survivors. Since when you try to camp, you have to camp for 70 seconds, but if you go away, the survivor can only stay for 50 seconds, which means more pressure for the survivor, and you can also go for a different survivor, so you have a win-win situation instead of just camping and wait for the unhook or second state. Next, I still think survivors should have a better unhook protection, and I really like the elusive status effect. And this should be added after the unhook, but for 20 seconds instead of 30 seconds, while the 10% haste bonus should be increased to 15 seconds. These buffs should be more than enough to make tunneling more difficult, but also to quickly find a place for a reset. However, once all generators are repaired, unhooked survivors only get 10% haste and endurance for 10 seconds. Moving on, in my opinion, the best solution to reduce tunneling is to give killers base kit rewards for hooking different survivors. And for that, I want to give killers 2 base kit features. The first one is the base kit painless, that removes 10% progress from the generator with the most progress whenever the killer hooks a different survivor. If a survivor is working on the affected generator, they will not scream and therefore not trigger DMS. At the same time, nerf the perk painless to 15%. The second one is the forever and whine and agitation base kit feature. Whenever you hook a different survivor, you pick up hooking and dropping a survivor speed gets increased by 5%, up to a total maximum of 20%, while your carrying speed gets increased by 3% up to a maximum of 12%. However, if you hook the same survivor twice in a row, you lose all of your gained progress. The reason behind this change is that the whole hooking a survivor progress feels really bad on the killer side, because it has a big downtime for killers, since you often pick up, carry and hook a survivor for like 10 to 12 seconds, which is a huge downside. And it involves also many risks, like for example a possible pollet save or flashlight save or sabo play. Like, it has a lot of risk to pick up and hook a survivor. However, once one survivor is dead, all of these benefits are gone. So no base kit painless, no base kit forever and whine or base kit agitation. In addition, if you actively hook the same survivor 3 times in a row, the total progress of every generator is reduced by minus 30%. The emphasis is on actively hooking the same survivor 3 times in a row, which means if a survivor dies due to pigs, bird trap or Sadako's condemn, the punishment will not happen, because technically you don't hook the same survivor 3 times in a row, you just kill the survivor. Same goes when a survivor dies on their first hook. Like, you didn't actively hook the survivor 3 times in a row, the team just wasn't there to unhook the survivor in time. This punishment is just there to make sure that hard tunneling gets punished enough, because I think it should be possible to hook at least one different survivor before another survivor dies. If you cannot afford this, it is a skill issue on your own, I'm so sorry. Lastly, I have some small changes to different things to reduce slugging, camping and tunneling in general. For survivors, Resurgence, Deliverance and Wicked either need a nerf or rework, because they punish the killer for hooking survivors. On the other hand, selfish perks such as Low Profile, Left Behind and Soul Survivor should get a rework that turns them into a healthy and helpful teammate perk. Luck Offerings as well as luck-based perks should also get a rework, since luck-based strategies are way too strong by easily punishing the killer for hooking survivors. Lastly, Gen Speed toolboxes and their add-ons need a nerf. If you want to slow down the killer by encourage them to hook different survivors, we also need to slow down gen speed, and the most problematic one is the toolbox speed. On the killer side, besides the base kit reward for hooking different survivors, perks should also encourage killers to hook survivors. For example, Gift of Pain and Floods of Rage, which encourage the killer to hook survivors but also to not tunnel, should have at least 6 scorched hooks by default to make them more reliable. Ravenous is also the type of perk that encourages the killer to play Mr. Nice Guy, but at the same time the reward is a little bit, not there, let's put it this way, and therefore should get additional effects to be more in line with the requirement it has. On the other hand, I would also give Painless and Human Brace the downside that they will not work if the same survivor gets hooked 3 times in a row to discourage the killer to hard tunnel with these perks. There's also the idea that these perks should stop working once one survivor is dead, but this is a little bit too much, and I think this little requirement should be more than enough to make the killer not hard tunnel one survivor out of the match. With the new base kit Painless and Monster Shrine feature, Human Base final blocking time should be reduced to 25 seconds, while DMS should also become a token-based perk that only triggers on survivor's first hook. I also like the rework idea for barbecue and chili that the developers had in their first attempt. Give this effect to a useless perk such as Undawn or Shattered Hope, and it would be already a great perk. The old or new idea for Furtive Chase is also cool, but Furtive Chase should keep the way it is right now and instead give this rework idea a different perk, like for example Shadowborn or Bloodhound. And last but not least, the Mangled and Hemorrhage as well as the Leverage nerf should be reversed, because anti-healing builds are also that type of playstyle that encourage the killer to neither camp nor tunnel, since otherwise you get 0 value from your build. And that's it. In my opinion, the game should be balanced around hooking survivors, and if this is achieved, every other issue gets fixed by itself. Survivors get many different buffs to reduce the effectiveness of slugging, camping and tunneling, while the killer gets only rewarded for hooking different survivors but a punishment for hard tunneling and camping. Of course, I know these are many different changes, but to reduce these 3 issues, we cannot go the simple way by giving one side everything and the other side gets nothing, because as I said before, if this PTB goes live, we will have a meta game where everyone becomes a Nurse and Blight main that still can tunnel, that still can camp, that can still slug survivors. It will be miserable for both sides. Killers can only play Nurse and Blight because every other killer will be just miserable to play, and every survivor just gets mad about seeing only Nurse and Blight and only gets tunneled, because these 2 killers will still tunnel even with these PTB suggestions. And this is in short also the reason why I'm not happy with these changes, because they don't solve the main issue. The issue just goes in a different direction. We still have the problem, but just a different one. And I really hope the developers will listen to us this time and then introduce a better solution. And with listen to us, I don't mean listen to me, but rather that the developers listen to the general feedback of the player base that has to play the game and has to deal with this stuff. It would also make me happy to hear what you think about the changes in general, or about my suggestions. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this video and have a good day or evening. Bye!